Good afternoon and welcome to the Demolition Daily LiveStream. I'm your host, Mark Anthony, but you've probably figured that out by now. It's just me today. And if that's more than you can stand, I fully understand if you'd like to duck out now. I'm getting tired of the sound of my own voice now. Regular viewers will know that these shows are numbered. We don't give them titles, but if they did, today's episode would be entitled Improvise, Adapt and Overcome. Now, I realise that's the motto of the Marines, or the unofficial motto of the Marines. But what follows has got nothing whatsoever to do with the US military. I know even less about that than I do about demolition, to be honest. I was listening to a podcast last night, mainly so I didn't have to listen to politicians trying to put a positive spin on the death of 30,000 or more of my fellow countrymen and women. And part of that podcast talked about a pizza restaurant in Chicago that had been forced to close amidst the COVID-19 madness that we're all enduring at the moment. Apparently, that restaurant had initially considered switching to a pizza delivery service to help maintain their cash flow. But being a high-end establishment meant that their pizzas were just way more expensive than those on offer from the established takeaway providers. But then someone did some serious thinking outside the box, outside the pizza box, if you will. They discovered that their pizza oven operated at precisely the temperature required to heat plastic, or the plastic used in the visors used by frontline medical staff. Now, that restaurant has switched from delivering life-affirming flavours of salami and pepperoni and is instead delivering life-saving masks and visors to the people that need them most, just when they do need them most. Now, I realise that's got precious little to do with demolition and construction, but this ability to think outside the box, to roll with the punches of the current climate, and to improvise, adapt and overcome might just be the most valuable tool and commodity we all possess in the coming months. As we're between magazines at the moment, I've been storing up press releases and that kind of thing. And I had a very quick look through our archives just before I came on air today. Obviously, the good folks at JCB have had a lot of publicity about the fact that they were involved in producing ventilator housings as part of the effort here in the UK. Just as an aside, before I go any further, I think JCB is often treated very unfairly by the wider media. It constantly innovates with machines like the Hydrodig and the Hydrovis dumper, and national newspapers just shrug when they do that. The company delivers food to villages surrounding its factories here in the UK and in India as well. And that same media just goes, so what? Yet the company announces it might have to make some workers redundant in the midst of a pandemic, and it's splashed across the front pages. JCB is a global success. It's one of the last vestiges of the UK's manufacturing past. In my opinion, it should be treated with far greater respect, but I digress. In the past few months, we've received press releases from a variety of companies, including a dust suppression company or a dust suppression equipment supplier, that has explained how its products can be used to disinfect large areas in a controlled manner. Precisely the sort of thing we're going to need in the coming months. We had another from a conveyor manufacturer that's developed a freestanding or countertop acrylic screen that protects staff and customers against the spread of COVID-19. That screen has been a huge success, apparently, with units being dispatched to a wide range of customers throughout the UK, including NHS distribution centres, hotels, clinics and retail outlets. Closer to my home here in Media Land, I've mentioned in the past the fact that I know of a crane operator who has launched his own podcast rather than sit at home twiddling his thumbs and waiting for all this to blow over. The chances are there's many, many more, countless examples out there of demolition and construction companies and equipment manufacturers pivoting their business in some way to hopefully navigate through the current economic storm. Maybe those stories will emerge when market departments go back to work and when PR companies come out of furlough. If you have any examples of your own, we'd love to share them. Frankly, we've got very little else to share at the moment. I guess in our own small way, we've improvised and adapted and overcome with this very show. I think we can all agree that I sound way better when my words are written rather than spoken. I'm painfully aware that I have a face for radio and that my voice belongs in probably a South London pub rather than on the global airwaves. But by the time we produce our 50th episode in the next few days, it's likely that these shows will have amassed more than 500,000 views across our various platforms. We've introduced the demolition world to 30 or more guests, some of whom you might never have encountered without this show. We've covered subjects that no other demolition publication would dare touch. We've reached more than 100 countries with these shows. Despite the language barrier, these shows are apparently big in Argentina and Brazil and Turkey, and we have a regular daily audience in the US and Australia. Speaking of myself, I feel more engaged with our audience now than I have ever done before. So, engagement is something that's sadly missing with a paper magazine. We just send the magazine out, keep our fingers crossed, and hope it hits the spot, but we never actually hear back. And yet all of this was born out of, I guess, good fortune and serendipity. I got back from the ConExpo exhibition in Las Vegas on the 14th of March and put myself in self-imposed quarantine. By the 20th of March, I was tearing out what remains of my hair with boredom. So I agreed to be a guest on the Founders 365 live stream, to just basically to talk about how Demolition News came into being, how we launched the Demolition magazine, the Demolition podcast, and so on. And that interview took place on a Friday. But having seen how easy it was to host a broadcast on a live stream, I created our own over the weekend. On the following Monday, we went live for the first time. And almost 50 episodes later, we're still here. Has it been a big money spinner? No, sadly it hasn't. Well, we have picked up a few bits of sponsorship along the way, but I certainly won't be retiring anytime soon on the proceeds. Mind you, we learned today that we're going to be working with a major industry brand over the next few months. I might not be able to pay the debt collector when he arrives, but I can at least afford to give him a cup of tea when he gets here. But that's not the point. If my advertising sales team weren't currently on furlough, or if a few equipment manufacturers had been maybe a little more on the ball and a bit more media savvy, I could now be sat on top of a pretty substantial pile of cash. Instead, I find myself staring at a fairly substantial pile of unpaid bills. But I remain unflustered because I've been here before. DemolitionNews.com started without any financial backing whatsoever. The Demolition magazine did precisely the same. Our Demolition News radio podcast ran for a year before it turned a buck. But as in all things, I defer to that line from the Field of Dreams movie. If you build it, they will come. And it's over time and time again for us, it's proved true. Today, let me go back. In addition to the lack of cash, the Demolition News website started without an audience. So did the magazine and the podcast and the YouTube channel. Today, demolitionnews.com is the world's leading news portal for the global demolition industry. Our magazine is the biggest and most widely read in the sector. Our podcast still stands alone as the demolition industry's only podcast of choice. Although we're stepping away from the Daily Show, who's to say that this live stream won't go the same way? Now, I'm saying all of this not to brag. I refer you back to my growing pile of unpaid bills that is gathering dust on my desk. I'm saying this hopefully to inspire you to look beyond your usual job, because we're not currently in the usual world, and there's a very real possibility that the usual world may never return. Now, I'm a man of advancing years of limited intellect and with a very, very narrow set of skills. Yet I've managed to pivot. I've been able to improvise, adapt, and overcome. If you work in demolition, the ability to improvise just courses through your veins. Whether it's in the methodology you choose or the equipment you deploy, you adapt all the time. And you overcome so often, you probably don't even realize you're doing it. In a world of one-trick ponies, you have more tricks up your sleeve than Penn and Teller combined. You have skills for days. You have versatile equipment that can be deployed in a multitude of ways and in a multitude of applications. And since you work in demolition, there's no question you have the ability to turn an idea into cold, hard cash. Now, I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that the demolition business takes a sharp left turn and opens a dental practice or a florist shop. But as Richard Dolman said on the show yesterday, just because you've always done something a certain way doesn't mean it's appropriate or right to continue down that path. And similarly, I'd urge you to check out a YouTube video that I watched last night called How to Adapt Changing Times. And it features my current go-to thought leader, a guy called Simon Sinek. And in that video, he asks why TV companies failed to come up with an innovation like Netflix, why book publishers didn't create the Kindle, and why the music industry didn't create iTunes. I think the answer in all three cases is very, very simple. In each instance, the established industries were just far too busy trying to protect their old way of doing things. They failed to innovate and to iterate, and they failed to focus on the specific needs of today's generation of customers. And I think perhaps the most telling part of Sinek's short 5-minute video, and I will link to that, is a very simple question. If you invented your industry now, knowing nothing about how things have been done in the past, what would it look like? Now, I can't speak for you, but I certainly, speaking for myself, my business would look completely different. Would I print a magazine with the environmental cost of paper and the cost of sending it through the post and the cost of print and all that goes with it? Or would I just go purely electronic? Well, chances are I go purely electronic. So ask yourself that question, what would your industry look like if you were to start it from scratch now? And while your competitors are looking to go back to their scheduled programming, paper book publishing and physical ownership of music, old normal way, maybe, just maybe, you might emerge as the demolition industry's answer to Netflix. Now, I'll add a link to that Simon Sinek video in the show notes. We're back again tomorrow. We do have a guest who is 3/4 booked. I'm hoping he will be able to make it, but I'll keep you posted on that. But in the meantime, I hope you found today's ramble and rant interesting and vaguely inspirational. Never saw myself as an inspirational character, and probably still don't, if the truth be told. But literally from the very outset of this show, from the day we launched, my feeling was that now was a time to recalibrate, to rebrew, and to reevaluate just how we do things. We're not in the normal world now, and chances are we're not going back to one. And I think it's the ones that adapt to that new paradigm, new way of thinking, new way of operating. Those are the ones that are going to come out of this all the stronger. So I'll leave you with that thought. As I say, I will add a link to Simon Sinek's video as well. In the meantime, until tomorrow at 3 o'clock, stay safe, stay positive, look after yourself, look after your friends, your family and your colleagues. And I will see you again tomorrow. Thanks for letting me ramble on one more time. I'll speak to you soon.